Welcome to the first afternoon breakouts. You are here for the power of partnership, connecting the supply chain to solve sticky problems. We have an hour for this discussion, and I am just going to hand it off real quickly to Tara Dalton, who is from WWF. She's going to be leading the discussion, and I guess I'll just hand it off to you now, Tara.
All right, sounds great. Yes, thank you folks so much for choosing this session to come here today. I don't think my clicker is working, at least the way I was told it would work, for pressing the green triangle button to advance the slides. Yeah, I don't think it's working. Oh, there we go. All right. Yeah, we have a really great powerhouse panel here today. I really mean that. I've had the pleasure of working with all these folks here on a multitude of different projects under the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment and U.S. Food Waste Pact, as I'm going to share in a minute. I will, as we go down the panel line and give them each kind of a quick chance to introduce themselves and such, we'll talk more about their different roles and companies they're at. But just briefly, I'm Tara Dalton. I'm with the World Wildlife Fund, and I've been focusing for the past 3 years on supporting businesses with opportunities for collaboration and peer-to-peer and supplier-to-partner fostering of acceleration toward food loss and waste reduction targets. So I mentioned kind of the U.S. Food Waste Pact and Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment because this has been kind of the foundation for a lot of WWF and these partners that you see here today on the stage. It's been kind of the platform for supporting cross-supply chain partnerships like we're going to talk about today. So the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment and U.S. Food Waste Pact, they're both voluntary agreement models in which businesses can join and sign on and commit to target, measure, and act to really accelerate progress toward their food loss and waste goals. And as part of that ACT portion, we try to support pilot projects and different initiatives, such as our whole chain projects. What is a whole chain project? Well, I do want to give a nod to WRAP, which is a nonprofit out of the UK, who really inspired us with this model that they found successful over there and that we've now replicated across the pond over here in the US. And a whole chain project takes one commodity and it engages businesses across the supply chain to map the losses, identify root causes, and then explore solutions together. And this might sound like not, that groundbreaking of an idea, but really it's about getting businesses the opportunity to kind of think and influence waste causes outside of their four walls, right? So oftentimes it's easiest to address food loss and waste happening in your own operations, but oftentimes that waste is occurring due to factors outside of your operations, up or downstream. And so it's really taking that kind of cross-value chain approach. And just as you might have seen from some of our interactive posters there in the back and such, the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment and U.S. Food Waste Pact have been busy publishing different whole chain projects on potatoes, frozen potatoes, strawberries, fresh plums, and we just wrapped up a beef and dairy whole chain project as well. So you're going to hear from our participants a little more background on some of those projects. But just to kind of get your brains working in a whole chain fashion here and do a little bit of gamification, let's see how whole chain smart our audience is here. Where do you think the greatest amount of waste was found for fresh plums? Was it on farm, at the distribution center, or retail? Anyone brave enough to just call out A, B, or C? A. On farm. And what amount of loss do you guess was found at that supply chain stage? 60%, 25, 2? B. I'm hearing 25, a lot of people. It was 60%, up to 60%. So yeah, really kind of an incredible amount of waste found. We use the global farm loss tool to help the farmer with measuring and tracking this waste. And some solutions, just kind of, you can read more about it from our case study on the PCFWC website, but some solutions are going to be looking at helping the local farmer with on-site refrigeration, for example. For strawberries, we also saw the greatest amount of loss on farm. What amount of loss do you guess was found on farm for strawberries? A, B, or C? 10, 36, 48, C, okay. Not a lot of you looked at our posters, I don't think, okay? It was obviously 36% if you had read our posters. So yeah, 36%, and what this doesn't say here was, I think it was about 25% of that is edible. So 25% loss edible, just not marketable necessarily. Last one here, and then I'm gonna get it over to our panelists, but frozen potatoes was the greatest amount of loss on farm, processing facility, retail. Okay. It was the processing facility, and what levels of loss do you guess was found at that supply chain stage? This is a trick question, sorry. Well, it was actually a range. It was 21 to 38%. I won't get into the details of why we had to present it as a range, but suffice it to say there's a lot of differences between processing facilities. So, okay, well with that, I hope your brains are all warmed up now and you're thinking in a whole chain fashion. I'm going to now turn it over to our panelists who have such great stories to tell about the work they've been doing to really implement solutions once they identified these whole chain problems. So I'm going to start here with Chris Franke from Walmart. Chris leads the Sustainable Food Systems Strategy at Walmart. Chris has more than 17 years experience managing environmental sustainability programs, ranging from retail food loss and waste to federal policy and compliance support. So Chris, can you tell us a bit more about Walmart's whole chain work and why you found this approach to reducing food loss and waste impactful and strategic?
Absolutely. So when we start talking about Walmart, and just for context, we operate in 19 countries and 2 million associates worldwide. So partnerships are absolutely key for somebody with a scale like Walmart. So our strategy is really no different. When we start talking about food, it absolutely has been said multiple times today, cross-cuts across everything that we do across the business. Our sustainability goals focus on 4 pillars: climate, nature, waste, and people. And I've tried to show some images up there that give that a good depiction. But when we start thinking about climate and emissions, refrigeration losses are a very real thing in retail if it's not managed efficiently. Natural disasters, et cetera, big contributors to food loss and waste as well. From a nature perspective, we have partnerships with all of our suppliers to make sure that those products are grown in a sustainable manner, and working upstream like whole chain assessments that Tara mentioned. I'll talk a little bit more on those. Waste, pretty obvious. Food waste relates to waste, surprise. But how we manage that as waste, and not thinking it as waste, but rather as secondary raw materials. So things like on-site biodigesters to take, when food does become waste, turn it into alternative products like renewable energy to serve our climate goals, or fertilizer to grow more crops on farms. And then it's all about the people. For us, our core purpose is to help people save money so they can live better lives. Working with our farm suppliers are no different, equitable farming, et cetera. So if you'll click to the next one. How do we basically take those partnerships and put it into a scalable strategy is sort of what's attempted to be depicted up here. And I've only got a couple of minutes, so I can't get into detail with all the partnerships and cool projects and stories, but this gives you a really good idea of how we've converted the food loss and waste message, starting with a partnership with our business. So in our own operations, working with our associate workforce to make sure that they're understanding on why this matters and what they can do individually to help us achieve our global goals. So following this pyramid, essentially the higher up our programs are executing in this, the more we're doing to minimize waste and maximize sales. We're a grocery retailer. That's the name of the game, is selling food and keeping it from going to waste. So I'll walk through a couple of key partnerships on the next few slides to bookend that pyramid and put it a little bit more in context. Oh, we're missing some data there on the slide. But anyway, so this first one, looking at the strawberries, this was a partnership with a whole chain assessment with Refed, with WWF, with LID consultants as well, to figure out where actually the loss was happening across the full value chain. So working with retail, working with suppliers to better understand what we can do about that in a partnership. Some of those berries, that 36% that was shown, the 25% being edible, a big reason those were going to waste or lost on farm was because they just simply weren't meeting retail spec for being big enough. So little berries, snack-sized strawberries, that just weren't, for whatever reason, our arbitrary assumption of what a customer wants. They want the really big strawberries in pack. So we found a way to basically take those small strawberries, working with a private label, great value brand supplier, a separate supplier, and turn those small strawberries into strawberry jam. And what that does is that allows us basically to buy more of that crop yield with that supplier, which means that they're selling more through a contracted outlet. It basically elevates their equitable share in this agreement with our farm suppliers. It obviously had a massive reduction to reduce their on-farm loss, and unintended benefits as well, of like reducing pesticide use. So really just kind of a win-win, and allowed us to offer an additional product at an everyday low price. So next one. So working, kind of skipping all the way to the bottom of the pyramid, this is a partnership we have with Denali. See Amy here in the green jacket. If you got any questions on this one, you saw a little teaser in the video this morning. This is basically how we've leveraged our scale to build out the easy button for managing food that does become waste, building out infrastructure that can handle one of our key barriers around packaging. As a retailer, that's a key thing that we need to have the unlock for in order to make sure that we can turn that food waste into secondary raw material, including just this year, bagging it and selling it as sustainable compost in our stores. So kind of closing the loop there. And then before I pass it off, just I'd be remiss to not give another shout out to a very critical partnership in the middle section of our pyramid on food recovery. So we have Feeding America, I see as well, but making sure that we're leveraging that partnership of 200 food banks and 60,000 agency partners around the U.S., global partners around the world and where we operate internationally, to make sure that we prevent that food from becoming waste by sending it to its intended purpose, which is going to people's bellies. So, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. All right. Next up, I'm going to hand it over to Gwyneth. Gwyneth Rampton is Vice President of Sustainability at Compass Group, so we're moving now into food service sector. Her journey with Compass Group began 14 years ago as a driving force at Food Buy, the procurement arm of Compass Group, where she spearheaded category development and corporate social responsibility initiatives. So Gwyneth, can you tell us about Compass's efforts, kind of the unique opportunities in food service in particular for reducing whole chain losses while achieving business outcomes? And I know too that we all love hearing about chefs. So can you tell us too kind of about your unique work that I know you've done around getting chefs to be a part of the solution?
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be able to speak to all of you. If you're not familiar with Compass Group, there's a lot of brands on the slide. So we're one of the biggest companies you've probably never heard of. And we serve over 1 million meals per day in business headquarters, universities, hospitals, and sports events. And we have a unique opportunity in food service, like any other food service provider, that the food is, that all the magic is happening behind the scenes. So our chefs are chopping and cooking and preparing behind the scenes. And so we have an opportunity to be more flexible in using an out-of-spec strawberry or a crooked carrot. And we took this idea back in 2014 on a pretty small scale, working with one grower on one commodity on a second cut spinach. And we called this program Imperfectly Delicious Produce, or IDP. It was really important for us to have a common terminology and something simple that we could talk about this product. So that chefs knew what it was. They knew why they were getting it. And it was important for chefs and our clients to understand we aren't skimping on quality, we're just trying to make better use of all of our resources. So this IDP program became something we could speak about to our chefs as consumers. We do have to think about them as consumers as well. I mean, they are consumers. We're a hospitality company, so first and foremost, we want to serve food that looks delicious and tastes delicious. And high quality ingredients are a key ingredient for those recipes. So chefs had to understand that when they were getting a case of product in the back door, it might look different than their typical strawberry or carrot. But that's okay, because it's part of our IDP program. So this was really important in terms of growing our program, and we have seen it grow over the years since 2014, but it's still relatively small. We have rescued over 17 million pounds of produce, but when you look at all the brands on the screen, there's still a lot more we could and should be doing. So we're really excited with this, the whole chain projects that we've been working on, partnering with Planet Harvest and taking a different approach to scale. Because part of the problem with scale and growing what we have already started to build is making that commercial impact and favorable business impact, having some favorable business outcomes. And so when we think about our program and how we want to continue to grow it and scale it, we want to make sure that there are positive outcomes for our clients, that we're bringing innovation, we're changing the industry, and we're bringing something to them that they haven't asked us for and that they don't have to pay for. This, among many of our other sustainability initiatives, is really important for our company's culture and associate retention, and our employees being proud to work for a company that does these kinds of things. And then more directly financially related, these products are inherently imperfect, so they need to cost the same or less than the conventional products. So Compass gets a lower food cost out of this, but the idea is also that farmers get increased yields, new revenue streams that they didn't previously have. And so I think we're at a good point to really begin to scale more and connect all the dots and make sure there is that win-win-win for all the parties involved.
Thank you. Yeah, and, I'll just say something both about Chris and Gwyneth is just working with them both. They've been so good about really pushing us to think big and think scale-wise. Like Chris told me, he's like, we're not gonna do a whole chain project for every single commodity out there, right? Like, come on, there's gotta be some way to like streamline this and make this, we're gonna be efficient about this, right? And I love that kind of thinking. Like, yeah, it's big picture. And Gwyneth too is like, these IDP strawberries, like how do we get them everywhere across Compass, right? Like let's not just think site by site, but like how do we make this be an infrastructural program? So love that thinking that you both have brought to this. I'm going to take us back to retail now. And we now have Kaity Robbins from Whole Foods Market. Kaity leads waste reduction and diversion strategy and brings a decade of waste expertise, starting as a hands-on waste auditor, and am I allowed to say dumpster diver as well? I know that's your, yeah, okay, yeah, that's her most fun accolade, I think. But yeah, Kaity, go ahead and please tell us some about Whole Foods' interest in the U.S. Food Waste Pact's ground beef project in particular, if you don't mind, kind of diving into that particular project and the interest that Whole Foods has in kind of taking these whole chain approaches.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me and outing me as my true self, which is a dumpster diver. I love it. That's what got me into this. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, Anyway, I joined the team at Whole Foods about 3.5 years ago, and I would be remiss not to start off with just a little bit of context about how Whole Foods thinks about sustainability. We've got 5 key focus areas, eerily similar to Chris over there: responsible sourcing, climate and nature, waste and packaging, people impact, and transparency, engagement, and reporting. So our team has leaders for each of those pillars, and that's what drives our sustainability strategy at Whole Foods. So, of course, I'm in the waste and packaging category and am our lead for waste reduction and diversion for both operational waste and our food waste. And we've made the commitment to 50% reduction by 2030. So the last couple of years has been getting our foundational programs in place. I feel so fortunate to work at Whole Foods because truly it's not BS when I say mission and purpose are at the core of the business. It really is the truth, which is not always the case. And so I feel very fortunate to work at a company with both leadership and our store team members caring very much about environmental causes and waste reduction. And so the last couple of years of getting our foundational programs in place has been great, and now we have our waste reduction strategy set, which is kind of a three-pronged approach of decrease, donate, divert. Sounds simple enough. We wanted a snappy slogan as well. It really brings the people together. So under the sort of group of decrease, right, we're thinking about order management, inventory management, how are we optimizing what we're producing in store and what we're ordering from suppliers. We're also thinking about markdown programs. We launched Too Good To Go network-wide last year, just reached 1 million meals sold through Too Good To Go. So really like scaling our discounting programs. And that's not the only one. We've got a homegrown program called Enjoy Today as well, which is basically a 50% discount for near expiry items. So all of those types of initiatives, what I listed and more, are sort of in that decrease category. The donate category, we work with Food Donation Connection. All of our stores are set up with local agencies. They receive 5 to 7 day a week pickups from those agencies, and food goes out into the local community. So we're adjusting the dials on that program to try and maximize it, but it is one of our longest standing programs that is very beloved by team members. And then the last category of divert, so when we think about food waste reduction, we're thinking about how do we get food to its highest and best use, right? So in the divert category, that looks like getting food to animal feed. So we're starting to have conversations and see how we can build connections in the animal feed space to convert more mixed retail waste into animal feed. And that's all to get kind of our own house in order, right? The participation in the Whole Chain Project is an opportunity for us to use our role within the larger supply chain to nudge for change and also to provide support to supply partners to make our preferences and our hopes and our dreams known in terms of waste reduction. And so, yeah, we were really excited to participate. The beef and dairy was our first Whole Chain project. It was absolutely a learning experience for us. I never dreamed I would know as much as I do now about meat grinding. It's been a real journey. But yeah, it's been eye-opening, and it's really catalyzed a lot of interesting conversations internally for us with folks I maybe would have not have connected with across my business and across my a supply chain before, unless you dive into the level of granularity that we're looking at for a Whole Chain project.
Yeah, I have to definitely second you there, Kaity, that I never knew all the intricacies of like the beef supply chain, and can really thank our next and final panelist here, Dr. Scott Howard, for just being such a wealth of information about that. And so thank you so much for kind of being our expert on that, Scott. But so Dr. Scott Howard has worked for Meyer Natural Foods, a supplier for Whole Foods Market, as the Director of Quality Assurance, focused on the production of steaks, grinds, and growth of branded programs. So Scott, as our only supplier here on the panel, you've got a big job here to represent, but can you give us your perspective on the value of the ground beef whole chain project that you did with Whole Foods and other retailers? And maybe also, I think you're ready to give the audience some insights into some of those details around like what waste opportunities exist. So.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for having us here today. Again, maybe to echo a little bit of what Kaity said, Meyer Natural really is founded on a maybe core set of beliefs that really resonate with this elimination of waste topic. We're a privately held company that, again, is founded on the idea of producing things what we believe to be the right way, doing so in an environmentally and socially responsible manner, and with that, certainly elimination of waste is a huge opportunity as well. And along with that, we certainly recognize the desire and the need to produce a sustainable product. And honestly, in the beef space, that topic can get a little bit complicated from time to time, depending on the model and how people are talking about that production. But I think the one thing we can all agree on is that if we waste the product at the end of the day, we've obviously wasted resources and wasted efforts and money that have gone into that. So simply put, we have a strong desire to be involved in this because it really does take collaboration and partnership through the supply chain. We need to make sure that the product that we're delivering to our customers, such as Whole Foods and others, is going to be something that they want, something they need, and something that they can market to a consumer. So without that demand signal there, really we can do all the work we want on the front end, but it just isn't really going to matter unless there's that pull through on the backside. So it really does take a collaborative effort to work our way through that. And again, waste at the processing level is certainly something that is talked about every single day. You know, as we got into discussion around this topic, I talked to these guys a lot about shrink is what we call it in ground beef processing. And shrink is something that our teams are held accountable for day in, day out. Simply put, there's about a sub 1% goal throughout the industry on pounds that are going to be dumped into a ground beef room versus what that room is going to end up producing. But again, there's a lot of opportunity within that and after that to address additional opportunities throughout. And I'll point out the slide here. Oh, can we flip back one? Sorry. Just to talk about the necessity for collaboration. And you see a couple different packaging formats up there. And really, packaging becomes a key topic when we talk about ground beef waste. And simply put, anytime that meat is exposed to oxygen or open air, you're going to have the propensity for a higher amount of shrink, discoloration, and waste. So at Meyer Natural, we sell an organic brand that's over there on the left in that brick pack format that is pretty much top of line in terms of shelf life and in terms of mitigating the challenges with potential waste at the retail level. But we also recognize there's a large demand from consumers for products that are in the center where they want to see a bright cherry red color. They want to see something pretty behind the glass, whatever that may be. So again, it goes back to that topic of collaboration that we can talk about waste all that we want and talk about the ideal packaging format for the group of us here on this panel, but it needs to be in a format that the consumer also wants and needs. So that's really where I think our involvement in this process really became central to understanding the needs of the retailer and the consumer, also with our interests on the processing side. And if I think we flip to the next slide, this highlights a little bit of what we were actually looking at through this project. And again, you can see in the bottom right there, that's kind of a stereotypical ground beef setup. And the point there is that there's a lot of equipment that these products are flowing through. And within that equipment, you see a lot of opportunity for things to get stuck, things to drop on the floor, whatever it may be. So there certainly is opportunity at the processing facility and some unique options that the team identified as far as mitigating some of that waste. The other thing, though, that I want to call out is just the simple process, right? So why it's so important to us in the beef industry is if we look at the totality of that carcass, that's the pie chart in the top left, we've got about 30% of that animal that's going to be what we call middle meats or items that are going to go into steaks and roasts. And those are the things that, for lack of a better expression, are pretty easy to sell day in, day out. Anyone can sell a ribeye, anyone can sell a strip, anyone can sell a tenderloin. Those aren't real difficult. However, there's another portion of that carcass that are going to be primal cuts that may need to go into ground beef because we aren't always going to have demand for a bottom round roast in the middle of summer. Simply put, people aren't coming into Whole Foods to buy a nice summer chuck roast, so we've got to find an opportunity to use that into our ground beef operations. Additionally, after that, you see things like fat, bone, and otherwise that we also have some opportunities to capture protein from. So really it goes back to that carcass utilization component for us, and in particular as a natural food company where we know that we're producing animals that require a little bit more input because they aren't being fueled by things like growth promotants, hormones, they aren't receiving antibiotics. we do use a few more resources to produce that animal. So we really have a responsibility at Meyer to make sure that we're doing absolutely everything we can to utilize that carcass as efficiently as we can and into the best possible application to meet our consumers' needs, but also to do what's right by how we optimize those resources during production. So once again, you know, we may sit in the center of it between the producer and the farmer, processor, but without connecting the dots on the backside, it's really all in vain for us. So that's really where we need to fit in this process. So.
Amazing. Thank you. Chris, can I borrow your mic? Thanks. Just feels better than getting up again. Thank you so much, Scott. Yeah, that's really interesting, and yeah, I think just so fun for us all who don't like work in the industry to be able to like dive in and really see in depth kind of what you're working with here, right? And I want to build off of some points you were making about kind of consumer demand to ask the whole panel here if you can weigh in. It seems like a lot of these challenges are about like what consumers want, right? Like consumers want the cherry red meat color, right? Or they want the perfect strawberry, right? And so that feels like a root cause almost that needs to be addressed. And I feel like, you know, and Gwyneth, you're talking about chefs as consumers and needing to reach that crowd. You know, I know you have the Jam Project here that reaches consumers at Walmart. Can you all just kind of talk a little bit about the opportunities you see for maybe engaging consumers, whether through education, right, marketing, to make these whole chain solutions more possible? So either the opportunities or the challenges there.
Sure. I think just as you said, so when you look at the full supply chain, I mean, you've got pretty much all the way down up until the consumer up on the stage today, but the largest portion of food waste is happening at home with the consumers. And so I think the only way to solve for that is to get a better understanding of what the consumer really wants. Do they want those berries that are bigger than, you know, X amount? Do they really want the cherry red meat, or do they care if it's slightly purple and in a vacuum sealed pack? And so finding ways to message that is where I think we can lean in as, you know, Kaity and I, perspective, leveraging our own consumer insights teams to figure out what Whole Foods customers wants, what Walmart customers wants, what Meyer customers wants, Compass Group, et cetera. So working with those teams to get a better baseline assessment, and, you know, speaking of partnership, we've got some other partners in the room too that we've tried to figure out what consumer behavior looks like on near expiry foods. Do we change the signing? Where do we put the product and placement in store? Does it need to be a yellow discount sticker, or is there something else that would be more resonating with the consumer? And so those are all kind of things that we can test within our own operational control, but without insights from groups like WWF, from ReFed, from RAP, WRI, on what the consumer behavior looks like at large, globally, nationally, regionally, locally, et cetera. We're kind of taking shots in the dark here, and based on just leveraging data from sell-through or any other metrics we have within our own operational disposal.
I'll add a little bit to that from a food service perspective. I mentioned that we have to look at our chefs as consumers. We have to figure out how to message to that large group of thousands and thousands of operators so that they know what to expect when they're getting that imperfect produce come in the back door. So one of the things that we did is as simple as ask our produce distributors to put a label on the box so that everyone knows it's an IDP product when it shows up. We're setting the right expectations. We're helping them understand what they're getting and why. Compass Group is a huge matrix organization, and so figuring out how to communicate the message throughout the levels across different organizations and dealing with the turnover that we have is a big challenge. So again, leaning behind that common terminology, repeating the message, helping educate as much as we can is really important. And we do have over 300,000 employees in the U.S., and so our associates that we're talking to are also the consumers going into retail stores. And so we also try to tap into our community and educate our associates to lean into these initiatives that we all believe are so important.
It brings up an interesting question, too, of like, where to educate the consumer. And there's conflicting feelings about going to a grocery store and having this signage feel like a lecture of sorts. Right, there's sensitivity to that. You want to grocery shop and we're very focused on customer experience. And so there's some hesitation about having sort of, preachy signage or packaging for products. And on-pack claims can only get you so far, right? It's literally limited real estate on a brick of meat to explain the whole process behind it. And so I think, and I don't have the answer here, but I've had a lot of conversations in the last 48 hours about this, about what is the right pathway and exact nuanced message to get to customers to influence their perception of the product and their buying habits. And I think it's really like, you're really fine-tuning a dial. And so beyond, consumer insights, I think we're gonna have to go as deep as like focus groups or, direct consumer surveys. Like we're gonna have to really, really dial in and understand what resonates and what doesn't.
Yeah, I think the one thing that Kaity just hit on also that is really interesting is the retail label topic, and increasingly in the space I touch every day, we're facing challenges from a regulatory perspective of what we're putting on that retail label and what we're presenting to a consumer. More and more USDA FSIS is saying, well, prove it. Okay, so if I label that product as no hormones added, they're saying prove it. Let alone if I try and approach some sort of a topic around sustainability, regenerative, less waste. That's just a much higher onus on the producer to, again, prove it if I'm going to put on that on a labeling claim. So it may be totally factual, but there is a regulatory element of it that becomes increasingly concerning in the space that we operate today, and also doing so in an efficient manner. So I think it's a really fine line to have to walk in terms of making an impact to that customer, doing so in an accurate and truthful manner, and then also getting through the regulatory hoops of how you present that. So just another concern maybe in that space.
Thank you all. That was, really great responses, and I think just shows like the nuance kind of everything we're dealing with here. And I agreed, Kaity. I think we need some like behavior change scientists to weigh in on this. It's a lot, right? One more just like quick question for me, and then I promise we'll turn it over to questions here from the audience. But I mean, you all just like make it sound so logical and like, oh, so simple. And we turned out this whole program that did X, Y, Z. And I know how challenging it was actually to birth these things, right? And so we talked about consumers as an external stakeholder, but there's all your internal stakeholders that are facing so many competing priorities at a business, right? How do you give food waste the stage it needs and the prioritization that it needs to get these whole chain programs in place where you often need to, a lot of you are in the sustainability department, so how do you get outside of the sustainability department to work with your buyers, work with the category managers, et cetera? Any insights there?
I'll start with that one just real quickly. So I think for us it's twofold. One, it makes a lot of sense because the meat is our most expensive input item, right? So selling the idea of wasting less of our most expensive input is pretty easy. However, the flip side of that and where expense comes in is also when we start talking about things like pack sizes and otherwise. So if we start reducing the pack size or pieces per box, whatever it may be that we're shipping out, then all of a sudden we have a little bit different conversation going on with our production teams around, okay, how am I going to do this? There's some beef plants in the US, many of them that can't physically handle the amount of boxes that are being produced per animal harvested today. So as we start reducing those pieces and those sizes and all of those things, and or producing more packages per animal in an effort to reduce shrink, it does become a challenging topic to address. So I think it's maybe a double-edged sword for us in that there are some very logical discussions to be had, but also some that become a little more challenging in terms of the actual production environment.
I think on our side, it comes down to really two things. It's figuring out how to prioritize and then embedding in the business. And so my old boss very much always repeatedly said, if we're doing our job on sustainability correctly, we wouldn't have a team anymore. Meaning that the sustainable choice becomes the everyday choice, and not just the products that we sell, but working with our suppliers to basically, again, not nudge from a food waste forward messaging, but because this is a good product. And it's cleanly sourced, and everything else that goes in behind that, and the sustainability attributes will follow. Rather than focusing on, like you mentioned, the on-pack claims and trying to kind of fight that battle and coming at it from a sustainability option first. And so with us, that, we have a large portfolio that we all manage within our respective companies. For us, it's very much relying on like surety of supply and sourcing teams to help with some of these supplier engagements, working with our foundation team to amplify food recovery networks and things like that, with our facilities team to help on the recycling piece, and then leveraging operations and existing tech and all the other stuff that we already have going on as a business, finding a way to embed our portfolio into what the business is already aligned to do, rather than trying to create a secondary stream. We talk a lot about having like 2 green lights in our business, and so having the green light for go on innovation from a sustainability lens, but first and foremost, it has to make sense for the business, or nothing will ever happen.
And I completely agree that the end goal is embedding sustainability within business decisions happening everywhere. That still gives me heart palpitations a little bit, like, okay, so how do we get there? Like, that is equally as big of a goal as the goal of solving for food waste. So I'll just say, like, exactly how we got to do this project, which was I looked in our internal system and I said, who's the category manager for meat? And I walked over to their desk and I said, hey, I want to do this exploratory effort. There's no commitment, but I think it'd be interesting. There's some potential shrink reduction benefits on the line for you. And it's with, our existing partners with Refed and with Meyer. Are you game? And she said, yeah, I can commit to a couple of conversations. And, it's asking for almost not the world, but just 30 minutes of time to start the conversation, and then helping your business partners start to see that shared value. Because I can preach about the shared value all day long, but until you're actually in the room and starting to have the conversation, I think it doesn't quite click in the same way. So just literally approaching people and saying, hey, you got 30 minutes to give to me?
Just add one thing to that, I think, and going back to that shared value and really having the business basically take ownership of this project, and they see the benefits themselves. It's a lot like dumpster diving, you take somebody to a landfill and say, and here's the problem we're trying to solve. I think visual interaction with these projects is key to everything.
There's so many facets of being a sustainability leader, and knowing sustainability, knowing reporting, like being the subject matter experts, but I've found it's also extremely valuable to know what's important to all these different functional groups that you need to take action or to do something. And to ask a lot of questions about what's important to them so that you can make the connections of what you want to try to get done that will also help them achieve what's important to them. So, the shared stakeholder value takes a lot of effort and a lot of work and a lot of research so that you understand how to make that connection for them. And just connecting back to what they're trying to accomplish, the IDP or whole chain projects, should be cost effective. So the procurement team should be excited about it. These are humans and people too, most of whom care about these same things. So, we can make those connections for them, get them involved, and understand how to find that shared value.
Thank you so much, Gwyneth. That was a beautiful way to wrap this up. Yes, everything yes to that. Yeah, well, thank you all so much for your insights and wisdom. And it's such a privilege to get to work with you all. And I do want to now turn it over to the audience, who I'm sure has plenty of questions to ask you. I think we've got a good 15 minutes for that, so.
Thank you so much. I think we all understood the business, the sustainability, and the management side of the supply chain. But what are your opinions on the technology, the AI, how it's gonna make an impact?
I'll jump in on this one because we were just talking about this earlier today, actually, and in fact, it's been very topical. Technology basically is the unlock to make data-driven decisions. And so you look at things like strawberries, for example, where every hour out of cold chain takes a day off the shelf life. Well, knowing what temperature those strawberries are all the way from their journey from farm to the shelf is critical information so that you can know how much expiry date opportunity might be left on that product to make sure that you're selling the freshest product in retail to the consumer, et cetera. So that involves basically digitizing a lot of the harvest date information, the expiry date, quality date, farm of origin, how long it's traveled, how many days it's had dwell time in a distribution center, what temp it's in, where it's geographically located exactly. So things like RFID technology around those lines are absolutely key in driving a lot of these decisions, and more importantly, simplifying the process for our workforce so that they don't have to have this subjective manual calling process, but basically giving our associates the time back to serve our customers because they have the tech enablement and tools and resources to help them make automated decisions. Good question.
Hi guys, it's David Rogers, the International Development Director for RAP. Nice to see you all. It's really great to hear you talking about working in partnership, and obviously we do this a lot around the world. We do meet retailers and hospitality companies who don't like to work in partnership, who feel that they need to go it alone. What would you say to them?
I can't even imagine trying to do it alone. I mean, it just takes such an incredible amount of partnership, both within our organizations, and there's so much that, I mean, I've taken pages of notes in just the first half day, and everything I'm learning from all the speakers and conversations and valuable, pre-competitive groups we're a part of. It truly is critical to making good progress. And, maybe there are some learnings from the U.S. Food Waste Pact and events like these and some of the side meetings that happen that could help illustrate that. It is a big challenge and a good one that you've identified as a big problem to solve.
And just like speaking from experience, my relationship with my supplier friends, can I call you a friend, Chris? All right, cool. It's just like, okay, good. Has just been incredible, right? Like there's no, sort of language barrier. You can get right into your shared issues and solution on a different level. And I think you find the same in speaking to expert industry or industry organizations like RAP, like ReFed, right? Like there's no barrier to diving right into the deep end. And that is just hugely valuable with the pace that we need to make change here.
I think adding to that too, and something you said kind of earlier, Kaity, so making sure that whoever is interested or you're soliciting to kind of engage in these partnerships, making sure that they're reminded that perfection should not be the enemy of good. So RAP specifically, I know you'll have a wonderful harmonized reporting template, and all of the challenge that come from trying to collect all of this data to make these assessments is difficult. It's data's in various states of maturity across our different companies. It's not always readily available. It's not always perfectly accurate. There's a lot of guesswork, a lot of assumptions. But I think taking that leap of faith, like you mentioned with the whole chain assessment, Kaity, that you kind of offer it up to the business partners like, hey, this is just an exploratory project. We just want to ask a few questions, and there might be something here, and recognizing that we're not alone in doing this. We've got the resources from NGO partners, consultants, et cetera, the collaborative efforts of the Food Waste Pact, et cetera, that help give that backing to know that you're going to get something good out of this project. And a lot of times it might not even cost you anything.
Yes, hi. So I'm going to take us from macro to micro for a second. I know that Refed and their partners are doing some research into the example you gave about the ground beef packaging. I'm curious from your experience, do you think that with the current economic climate that educating consumers about the vacuum-packed bricks lasting a lot longer, staying moister, easy to freeze would be enough to convince them that those and the Chubs are a better choice? Or do you feel like they're so married to the cherry red styrofoam tray version that it's going to be hard to sort of wean them off that, or there would be a lot of pushback if that option were simply removed in favor of the better options, both for the environment and price-wise and waste-wise?
I mean, if there was a time where consumers were open-minded to it, it would be now, right, with the rising food prices and more awareness of food waste as an issue. So now is the time if we were to test that out, and we'll see.
Thank you so much for this amazing conversation. Food and food literacy are inherently experiential. Have you ever thought of using the retail space? I know Compass does a lot with the teaching kitchen, but have you thought of using the retail space as an educational space for experiencing the deliciously imperfect produce or other type of food that are maybe less appealing, but that people can taste and just see for themselves?
I think we could probably definitely do a better job of working with that consumer education space. So kind of as I alluded to earlier, a lot of it's around we just try things, just see what happens. And then you let the sales data and things like that kind of guide our decisions from that point forward. There's a lot of like operational considerations that go in behind the space of, we were talking yesterday about, signing if we wanted to say, well, the vacuum pack has longer shelf life. Well, there's operational considerations for where that signing would go. How do you make sure that it's applied properly in store? When is it taken down? How much is too much? Are you going to shame them, or should we just show pictures of like the slaughterhouse to the consumer and say, this is why you buy in a vacuum pack? But no, I don't know. So I think a lot of it's just trial and error. But I think we could do more about at least kind of trying to do more around educating our consumers in e-com space, where we have a little bit more flexibility to kind of direct message for things like recipes using leftovers. We've kind of already made some efforts with our corporate communications pages and things like that to provide fridge extension tips and things like that, or provide links for our own in-house recipe repository that you can go and just basically whatever ingredients you might have on hand, help tailor a custom-made meal for you that's culturally relevant, nutritious, and everything else. So from that kind of an angle, I think that's where we're leaning in on, but probably could do some more on a in-store activation space.
I was thinking of sampling and tasting.
Mm-hmm. Chef demos, things like that are. We've gone down, see Christy over here. We were working on another project with a consumer goods forum and looking at ways to encourage consumer behavior in store. And again, kind of going back to some of the operational considerations, a lot of times in planning an in-store chef demonstration, which seems, again, really simple, right? You just get somebody in the store. You've got to make sure that you've got the right amount of inventory on hands that day, that it is near expiry, the fluctuation of replenishment can change, making sure that the meal is planned and all the allergens are addressed and things like that from everything that goes into it. So it's a lot more complex than just kind of pulling some things together. However, you get into the digital space and you could start working with an influencer like we saw earlier this morning that's taking leftovers of, or markdown product that they picked up at Walmart or Whole Foods and whipping some new creation together with the half-cut dumplings and like we saw earlier. So yes, that would be a more flexible pathway, I guess.
Hi, my name is Maria. I work at LID Supply Chain Consulting in food waste, and we're working with ReFed to measure food loss and waste in manufacturing and distribution across all commodities, but specifically meat and dairy. So I was curious, when we think about solutions in the sector specifically, we try and understand what the businesses are looking for and trying to speak their language. And so, for example, for meat, we know it's very costly, so whenever you lose meat, you also waste costs. And this is an incentive for them to reduce waste, but I was wondering what other aspects could incentivize them to reduce waste in terms of efficiency or operational aspects can you think of?
You want? Go for it.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think cost is a consideration for us as well, and labor is probably the second one that I hear most. So if you think about all the different applications of labor, there's labor involved in shrinking product, and there's labor involved in even donating product or disposing of that product. So I think cost and labor are the ones that I most often go to when I'm building some sort of business case.
Oh, and I was just going to add, you know, food waste is this unique problem that has so many different whys, and there's the couple that you've mentioned specific to beef and dairy. Same could probably be said across any type of food waste. But there's also the why of it can save time in the kitchen if you're effectively cutting, the climate impact, the community impact. So there's a why in food waste for almost anyone. And talking about all those different whys across the audiences is important so that each person can find their own why and find their own passion in food waste based on that why.
Yeah, just adding, I think in addition to cost, labor, I think it really sort of challenges us to think holistically from a systems-wide approach. Like, what are the other variables and considerations that might be intentional or unintentional benefits or consequences of doing something? We have a project in Costa Rica with Walmart where we sell pineapples without the crown, without the leafy stalk part on top. And you might think, well, what in the world? Like, what are you doing? A pineapple? Like, I wouldn't buy a pineapple without the crown on top. But it was a decision that was made, in part from recognizing that most consumers probably don't do anything with the crown. It gets thrown in the trash can. And so from a shipping and transportation perspective, you can fit fewer pineapples with crowns in a box, which means it costs more to transport them, which is higher emissions. And so by having the farmers remove the crowns at the source where those pineapple plantations are happening, they're taking the crowns and the nutrient loads and putting that right back into the soil as compost to grow more pineapples. So it's a win-win-win-win really kind of across the board, however you look at it. But taking things from like packing, they pack a lot neater in a box, less transport costs, less emissions, less waste, less consumer-driven waste downstream, less culling from a store when a customer is looking at a crown and sees that the leaves are slightly browned or something and assumes it's going bad. So taking that perception out of the equation as well and basing it just on the portion that's going to be eaten. So really kind of trying to challenge yourself more broadly outside of labor, cost, et cetera, but look at those other tangential variables.
Do we have time for one more, Jeff? Or?
We do. We have 2 minutes.
All right. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you all so much. Courtney Jagiff with Ratio Institute, do environmental consulting with food retailers. I was curious about the scope of the products that you have been talking about today, whether those supply chains that you evaluated, for this purpose was all contained within the U.S. or at least North America, how you decided on these particular supply chains, if they were indicative of produce, other meats, things like that. If you could just speak to that.
Yeah, good question. So kind of first we looked at like where is the greatest amount of waste occurring, right? And we just knew from the data that so much waste was occurring from produce, right? Being left in the field. And so we started kind of with the strawberry whole chain project, did the frozen potato and plums as well. And so getting some just really hard numbers there was really critical. But we also really consulted deeply with the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment and U.S. Food Waste Pact signatories and asked where are you seeing the greatest amount of waste in your operations occurring? What commodities would you most be interested in studying? And berries were a very high waste item that retailers were all interested in looking at further. And yeah, I'm not sure if Chris or Katie, if you want to speak to any more of those.
Yeah, so I think as Tara mentioned, kind of how we came to these particular commodities was sort of a packed decision. It was just without sharing any sensitive data. It was like, where would you like to focus? What are your waste hotspots? I think kind of how, at least with Walmart's side, how we've taken the learnings from that, particularly with the berries, and found this great opportunity through crop utilization by taking the smaller berries and turning it into jam. That led to a whole other thing that helps with additional crop utilization opportunities, to your point, where if you could regionally source and serve maybe 2 different international markets by using the same supplier that's more regionally centric, you get some of those transportation savings as well. So, and it helps you basically buy more of the crop as well as a result, knowing that it's going to 2 different markets, 2 different countries or so. But I think there are a lot of those decisions that come into play, and let's be honest, we're not growing coffee or bananas or something like in most states in the United States. So a lot of this does have this international supply chain feel. And when you start looking at food insecurity and climate change and everything else, having a team that's connected to the sourcing constraints and the risks and the challenges of sourcing produce in an area that's prone to drought, or from the Marshall Islands that are going underwater. It's like, how do you balance those decisions in a way that makes sense, recognizing that as retailers we might not have food left to sell if we're not careful. So, definitely has international consideration.
Well, I think that is all we have time for here today. If you have any more questions, please feel free to email me, but definitely come up here and talk to our panelists. Check out our website at U.S. Food Waste Pact and Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment for the case studies of these projects. And thank you all so much for your great questions and attention.